Hello, welcome to Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. This video is all about Trugg and his Troggherd. Games Workshop today, in their Warhammer community article, has released the War Scroll and some information about Trugg, the new Trogg that you can put in a Gloomspite Gitz army, which is very exciting. It's all going to feature in the Dawnbringers 2 book, which is coming out soon, which is the ongoing narrative Games Workshop have released about the kind of end of this edition of Age of Sigmar. Hopefully not the end of Age of Sigmar, hashtag end times flashbacks, which would be pretty terrible. But no, that's not what it's going to be. So there's each Dawnbringers book, there's only been one so far, kind of releases 4 different characters, and today they're talking about Trugg. Now, the Trugg is competing in this book with Big Pig, and I'm going to need you in the comments below to tell me whether or not you are more excited for Big Pig or your Trugg. Either way, you're a destruction player, so you probably can't read and write. It's a bit awkward, I know, but here we go. Okay, so the chat, and I'm joined by the chat. The chat are rooting for bacon, and some are rooting for Trugg. Okay, big Trugg stonks. So we're going to talk about Trugg. So this is the community article. It's obviously on Warhammer Community. You can go check it out yourselves if you need to. Now, there is some bump up here about some of the stuff. We're going to look at the War Scroll in more detail in a bit, and they have said that there's going to be 4 different armies of renown, or different Dawnbringers. So Trugg himself is a Dawnbringer. Okay, now the first bit is quite complicated, so before we talk about the War Scroll, we're going to talk about this first because it's going to add some context. Trugg's Troggherd changes how he plays. Okay, so Trugg's Troggherd is an army of renown. No, you're asking yourself, Rob, oh, they've already done those before. That's actually not true. So in this Dawnbringers book, you can see me waving around at the screen here. This has got 4 regiments of renown. Regiments of renown are not usable inside your own faction. So you won't be able to use like the Fire Slayers Regiment of Renown inside Fire Slayers, as an example, when it's a regiment of renown. When it's a army of renown, it seems that you can put it inside your own army. Let's read on, shall we? Trugg's Troggherd changes how he plays, giving him an army of renown that homes in on a specific archetype inside an existing battle tome. So effectively, it's just going to be all Troggs. Okay? For Trugg's Troggherd, this means a march of Troggoths, big and small, with new rules, command traits, artifacts of power, plus a bespoke grand strategy and battle tactics. Now, this is brand new to Age of Sigmar. Normally, we've just had battle tomes and everything that exists inside the battle tomes. That's what we've had kind of so far. There's been some fringe stuff on the edges, like the Incarnate, for example, has been this kind of thing that's nebulously existed. Same with endless spells that have existed inside the General's Handbook and not really inside a battle tome. But this is going to exist outside of it. Now, this is exactly like what happened in 40k 9th edition. What they did is they did a codex, and then they did like an additional codex, which was kind of I can't remember what they called it at that point. It was universally badly, not received well, because what they would do is they would take a singular subfaction, and then that's all they would ever make for it. So they never released a book for each of the subfactions, if that makes sense. So it was just a book in addition. Now, this is kind of weird because it's on top of the Gloomspite Gitz book, which released earlier in the year. So it feels like a compendium to that. So it's like a codex supplement, but inside some narrative campaign book. So it's quite odd, especially for people who are like, oh, I just want to play. They pick up Trugg first miniature they ever buy, and then they pick up the Gloomspite Gitz book, and they're like, I'm ready. And you're like, you're not ready. So it was not received well. I would say the 40k version. Anyway, but this is what we're going to get in for Trugg. So Trugg is going to get his own command traits, or the Trugg army, sorry. Artifacts of power, plus a bespoke grand strategy and battle tactics. That's pretty crazy. It feels like it's effectively a Trogg army in all but name. Almost its own battle tome with everything that you would get inside of a battle tome in that. Trugg's Troggherd is first up, and it's made exclusively from units with the Gloomspite Gitz and Troggoth keywords. So that's going to be, in order, the Trogg boss. So he's called a Dankhold Trogg boss. Completely different, and he's a hero, so don't forget that. Completely different to a Dankhold Trogg boss is a Dankhold Troggoth. Completely different. And they are going to be able to become battle line, because it says every non-hero unit gaining the battle line role So that means that you're going to be able to triple reinforce a dank old Troggoth. Oh boy. Oh boy. Which is, I mean, people are very excited about running 3 dank old Troggoths together, which is very fun. Also, it's going to include Rockgut Troggoths, Fellwater Troggoths. But because you need to have the Gloomspike Gits and Troggoth keyword, it isn't going to include Dobby, which is the Cruel Boys Troggoth that's kind of been enslaved by the Cruel Boys. Kind of makes a bit of sense, but a bit of a shame. I don't know if it's going to include any of kind of the the Warcry stuff or any of the Underworld's warbands, which also have Gloomspike Gits keyword and the Trogg keyword. So I'm not 100% certain about that, which I think is going to be weird. And in addition to it being weird, there's already a sub-faction for Troggs in the Gloomspike Gits book called Glogg's Megamob. So it's just odd. It's just an odd kind of situation. But it's kind of exciting as well because look at the artwork. I mean, let's take a moment. The artwork's phenomenal. So Trugg is a troll that fell asleep, and then they put someone built kind of like a rune on his, like a temple on his back, and he's and now he gets magic headaches because of it, which is just amazing. But the artwork's stunning, so that's kind of important as well. Right, okay, so that's everything that we know about like Trugg's Troggherd until we get the full information about it. But it's quite interesting. Very, very interesting. It's quite important because his war scroll is a little bit underwhelming, but when you take him in the Truggherd, I guess that's what we're calling it now, it's going to be really good. Okay, we're going to look at his war scroll, and Trugg's war scroll is pretty good. We should talk about the fact that he starts out at 320 points. He's a leader, and he's a monster, and his base size is 100 mil. So it's not as big as a Maw Crusher, which is good. So it's going to be a little bit more manageable. So it's fine. 320 points, I think, is okay for what he's going to bring to an army. Now, a couple of things we should talk about. The fact that he's a monster means he's going to get 2 monstrous actions, and Roar is a really good kind of like meta pick. Being able to run up to a unit and roar it, or even the opportunity to destroy another faction's terrain piece, are kind of big advantages to having a monster in your list. So sometimes when you are writing a list, you might want to think about whether or not you are or aren't going to take a monster. So there's already some amount of points that you're going to instigate in his points cost, or like apply to his points cost, because he's a monster. And it's quite good that he's going to be a monster. Right, okay, so for 320 points, you get a 16 wound model with a 4-up save. Now, that's not super survivable, but with things like Mystic Shield and All-Out Defense, and because he's a hero, he's going to be able to Finest Hour retroactively. So, like, one of the things that happens a lot is Finest Hour, which gives you +1 to wound and +1 save, is normally done in your opponent's turn. You know, you would put Trugg out into the middle of the board, and it looks like he's about to be charged by something pretty scary. Then you would Finest Hour. So that's a way of making it so that you get +1 save without your opponent being able to do anything about it. Then you could also do All-Out Defense unless you get roared, but guess what? He's a monster. Okay, so like that's the reason that you have monsters. So he should be able to have +2 to his save, which is quite nice. He's also a troll. Thank you to Trogg and Collaroo in the chat. So he's also going to get +1 to his save while under the light of the moon, which is the allegiance ability for Gloomspike Gits. So this does mean he's going to be able to have like a 3-up save pretty much most of the time. 3-up save ignoring maybe Ren 2. Mystic Shield, 3-up save ignoring Ren 3. Okay. The big problem with Trugg is that he only moves 6 inches. You can roar monsters. So, sorry, just to be clear, you can roar monsters. I was never saying you can't roar monsters. I was saying the reason that we talk about roar a lot is because, or monsters, or having him as a monster is really good, is because roar is available. So he can do all-out defense unless it's a monster, which is why I said sometimes it's just good to have a monster. But good clarity. Thanks very much from the chat. So most of the time he'll have a 3-up save, 16 wounds. So pretty survivable. But he does move 6 inches, and that sucks a lot. That's quite slow. But his bravery is 8, which is kind of nice, because it does mean that some of the abilities that stop units moving due to bravery is a little bit higher than you get in most destruction armies. So actually, the numbers on that are quite nice. So bravery 8 is good, but movement 6 is very slow in my personal opinion. So not a huge fan of that. Okay. So the one thing to talk about when we're talking about survivability, or that we should talk about talking about survivability, is his regeneration. At the start of the hero phase, you can heal up to D3 wounds allocated to this unit, but he's also got another ability called Imbued with Life. When you roll the dice that determines the number of wounds you can heal with this unit's regeneration ability, you add 3 to the number of wounds you can heal. So each hero phase, he's going to heal D3 plus 3. That doesn't include, obviously, being able to do the heroic action, like where you can heal D3 as well. And then because his bravery is fairly high, he's also probably going to be able to do that. So D3 plus 3 plus maybe another D3 is pretty good. So he's going to be able to heal a lot. He's got a good armor save. His problem is a ward save, but we're going to get to that in a minute. There's a way to solve that. He's a War Master. That's on his War Scroll. That means he's going to be able to do command abilities from outside, from 18 inches, holding within 18, which is pretty good. And if we look at his attack profile, he's got all of his attacks at 3-inch range, which is great. It means you can screen him with something else, and then he can reach over the top and smash some things. He's got a very confusing attack profile. His Iron Shell Club starts out with 4 attacks, and it does diminish as he gets wounded. Hits on a 3, wounds on a 3, and his Ren 2, damage D6. This is going to make it a very swingy, or some math people would describe it as having a high variance. So sometimes he's going to absolutely club stuff, and sometimes he's going to roll a couple of 1s. Also, hitting on 3s and wounding on 3s is fine, because you can obviously all-out attack, so it's going to be 2s and 3s, and then if you find his hour, it's going to be 2s and 2s, which is fine. His Mighty Antlers, though, are much better. But there's only 2 attacks with these, where they hit on 2s initially, but that does get worse if he gets wounded. Then wounds on a 2, Ren 2, and then D3 plus 3 damage. So he has a more consistent damage profile from that. And so he's kind of okay. He's not like a very scary monster, but sometimes he'll be a little bit scary. And a little bit susceptible to -1 to hit. But he's fine, but not brilliant. And he is slow. Okay, so War Master we talked about, his healing we talked about, and to add to his damage profile, he has Crushing Grip. At the end of the combat phase, you can pick one enemy model within an inch of this unit and roll a dice. If that roll is equal to or greater than that model's wounds characteristic, it's slain. So because you can only roll a 6 on a dice, that does mean that any model or any model in the game that's got 6 wounds or less is going to be able to auto-slay, which is pretty cool. A hot pick is obviously picking out either banners or musicians or unit champs out of enemy units, which is a fun thing as well. Okay, so he's got this final bit. Now, before I talk about the final bit, I would say one of the things I'm a little bit disappointed with him is that while he's described as the Troggoth King, there's nothing on his War Scroll that really tells me he's a king. Like, there's no like kingly ability other than the War Master thing, because obviously he's a War Master, and it's kind of lame. The Malfunctioning Leystone, which he has on his back, he got for being asleep, so it's not very kingly of him. Like, and he doesn't like it. It makes him mad. And because of that, you've got a rule for it. At the start of the hero phase, if this unit is on the battlefield, you can, and this is an important thing to note, it's optional. You can say that this will clobber its Malfunctioning Leystone. So if you want, you don't have to, and that means it will continue to apply because at the end it says this effect applies until this unit clobbers its Malfunctioning Leystone again. So normally that means until your next hero phase, but you could keep a consistent buff up for just him over the course of a battle, if that's what you want to do. Okay, now if you do so, roll a number of dice equal to the Malfunctioning Leystone value shown on this unit's damage table. Starts out at 4. Okay, each roll corresponds to one of the results below. You rolled, you must pick one of the results you rolled and apply its effects. So you roll 4 dice, but you only pick one effect. So it gives you a more consistent chance to get the effect you want. On a 1, you take D3 mortal wounds. You obviously don't want that. On a 2, you add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons, which you probably want. That's pretty great. You got Glyph of Ashqui, improve the Ren characteristic of this unit's melee weapons by 1, which is also pretty great, because that will make him Ren 3 on all his attacks, which is good. Then you've got the Glyph of Heesh. Roll a dice each time this unit receives a command. On a 2+, you receive 1 command point. Now, while that doesn't sound remotely good, when we go and talk about using him inside of his own army, that is actually crazy. And we'll talk about that again in a second. Okay? Glyph of Ooglu, only unmodified hit rolls of a 6 for attacks made with missile weapons that target this unit score a hit. Huge. So effectively, only 6s to hit against missile weapons, so could be immune to shooting. not immune, but pretty good against shooting. A lot of effects that obviously happen on 6s, like mortal wounds, like cruel boys, for example, fusiliers when they come out. That is going to cause him a bit of a problem, but he's got great healing as well. And then you've got the Glyph of Shimon. This unit has a ward save of 5+. Probably long term, depending if you're not against a shooting army like KO, the 5-up ward save is probably almost always better. And this guy is going to be very difficult to get rid of because every hero phase is going to heal a lot. So you're going to be in a real struggle to get rid of this guy. So we'll stop at this point looking at his war scroll. I don't want to know what the Twitch chat, but also anyone watching this YouTube video or listening to the podcast think about him at this point. I'd say he feels a little underwhelming at this point as he is. His melee profile is okay. His survivability is okay. I think the thing to remember with troll armies and Trogg armies, or when I've seen them play, normally you get like 2 units of 6 Rotguts and some Fell Waters, and the Fell Waters really improve the ability of the Rotguts to do damage, and the Rotguts are really survivable, and they've got almost the same profile. They've obviously got the ward save built in as well, and they've got the magic ignore, which is good. So I'd love to know what everyone thinks of Trugg as a war scroll. I think I'm going to give him... I think it's a fine war scroll. I think the one problem I have with the war scroll is it doesn't make me feel like he's very kingly, which is a little bit odd. I like that they've given you a consistent way to get the effect that you want. But inside of his own army, I think he becomes much, much better. So when you put him inside, or when you take Trugg and then Trugg's Troggs, you get the battle trait, the Aura of Haywire Magic. Obviously, we don't know all the command traits and all the artifacts yet, but this is what you get. At the start of the hero phase, if you use a friendly Trugg's Malfunctioning Leystone ability, the effect you pick applies to all other friendly Trugg's Troggherd units until the start of your next hero phase. And I know you're asking yourself, what the hell did you just say out loud with your mouth, Rob? Very simply, if we go back to his war scroll, all of your Troggs that you've got in your army, so your Dankhold Troggoths, your Trogg bosses, your Rotgut Troggoths, your Fellwater Troggoths, the effects that are going to happen from the Malfunctioning Leystone are going to affect them as well. Now, unlike when you roll for Trugg, so when you roll on his thing, which is elective, you must roll to be able to apply it to everyone in that hero phase, if that makes sense, okay? So, let's talk about this in conjunction now with, or this kind of whole thing, in conjunction with applying this to trolls, because it becomes crazy. So if the ones you want to roll are like number 3, the Glyph of Ashqui. Improve the Ren characteristic of this unit's melee weapons by 1. But now you're going to be improving all of the Ren characteristics for melee weapons by all of the Troggs in your army by 1. That's nuts. Okay? Glyph of Gur. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons. No. Improve the attacks characteristic of all of the Troggs in your army. That's crazy. Okay? That's so good. Okay? Glyph of Heesh. Roll a dice each time this unit receives a command. On a 2+, receive 1 command point. This is amazing. This effectively means you get to keep recycling command points. So this is going to apply to all of the Troggs. So I'm going to be like, okay, cool. That unit of Rotguts, I'm going to give them +1 to hit. Okay, 2+, I get that command point back. Okay, I'm going to give a redeploy. 2+, get that command point back. You should have almost infinite command points, basically, if you use the Glyph of Heesh. And then finally, you've got Glyph of Uglu, which is only unmodified hit rolls of 6 for attacks made with missile weapons. Target this unit. So, I deploy my Trugg's Troggs. I'm up against KO or some Fusiliers or whatever. And then all of a sudden, I roll my 4 dice. My entire army is only shootable on 6s now. Absolutely insane. Okay, absolutely insane. And then the 5-up ward save at the end. Every Trogg in your army gets a 5-up ward save. Now, Rotguts already have it, but this makes Fellwaters really, really interesting as well. And Fellwaters are really good for, like, you know, shutting down enemy units, which I think is fun. Okay, so that's nuts. Okay, that Aura of Haywire Magic is going to make these Trogg armies, which are already pretty good, really great, which is interesting as well. But only if you take them inside the Army of Renown. Finally, they've also showcased a command trait. So this is something you're going to have to take on a Dankhold Trogg boss. And the one they've showcased is Ceaseless Growth. When you roll a dice, it determines the number of wounds you can heal with a Trugg's Troggherd unit, regeneration or greater regeneration, add 1 to the number of wounds you can heal. So +1 wound, so then you're going to be healing D3 +4 on Trugg, which is pretty nuts. That just means a lot of healing for this army as well. There's also a artifact of power they've showcased, which is Thwack Weezer's Club as well. Okay, and that's if a unit has fought, then they're now -1 to hit and wound in combat. So if you strike first, it's going to happen. That's everything, and like honestly, it's a lot to get your head around. It feels really linear, which I think is actually really, really good, depending on who you are and what you want. If you are like a new Age of Sigmar player or someone who's pretty casual, this really reminds me of warscroll battalions from Age of Sigmar 2, and it reminds me of like the kind of things that they tried to do in 40k 9th edition. And maybe it's like the perfect synergy of the two. It feels, which is kind of at odds with who I think it's marketed towards. Because what you want as like a new person is you almost want like a buyer's guide. You want to walk into a GW store, or you want to go online and you're like, hey, I'd like to play loads of trolls. What can I take? And they're like, cool, what you want is you want Trugg's Troggherd. And you're like, okay, perfect. And you're like, what does that mean? I'm like, okay, well, you got to buy this book. Then you have to buy the original book. Okay, and then you have to understand how this works and what an army of renown is and what keywords are and a bunch of other stuff. And that's, in my opinion, very confusing. But if you're able to get past that and get over that, it's actually a really linear army. And I think there's two things with that which are interesting. One, if it's linear and very, very good, like its battle tactics are very easy to achieve, and its grand strategy is easy to achieve, then what you get is you're going to get almost like a buy-to-win playable tournament army that might even be too good, depending on how it settles with points and what the other abilities are. Or you might end up on the other side of it where it's not very good at all and there's no way to kind of improve it by bringing other units into the mix, which is kind of weird as well. So I'm not sure how I feel about the armies of renown, specifically because also someone like me who reads through tournament lists every weekend, when they do become like the same copy and paste thing all the time, it just does become a bit dull. I think, but they're trolls, so they're cool. The final bit about this is that Trugg's Troggherd is one of 4 armies of renown, not regiments of renown, in the new book that's coming out, Reign of Brute. To supersize your experience, try Kingbrod's Stomp. So Gargants are going to get their own army of renown, which means they'll probably get command traits, artifacts, and battle tactics, which is weird. Then you're going to get, there's a Grundstrock Expeditionary Force one, which applies overwhelming pressure to its foes with Thunderers and Gunstruck Haulers. So again, you're probably only going to take Thunderers and Gunstruck Haulers in that list, which again makes it very linear. And I'm not sure if I like the idea of something being so linear, but it also is really useful for new people, but it's confusing for new people. So it's very weird. And then finally, there's an Iron Jaws one as well. So I'd love to know what everyone thinks. I'm personally a big fan of Trigg, the guy who rides upon Trugg. I think it's weird that he's called Trugg and there's Troggoths, and it's a little bit confusing. But I think the model's great. I think more trolls is good. I think it's a little bit heartbreaking that he's called a king when we previously had a princess. So the Troggoth princess, or the troll hag, as she was villainously described by Games Workshop, villainously described. The Troggoth princess was close to many a Destruction player's hearts, including mine. I had a Troggoth princess. She was, the light and love of my Warhammer life. And it's a shame that this Troggoth king does not have a Troggoth princess now to wade along with her. So I would like to see Games Workshop bring back the Troggoth princess. Long live and RIP. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks very much for tuning in. And you can support me making videos like this by liking, subscribing, leaving comments, and supporting me on Patreon. Thanks very much for tuning in.